trying to cope up to the disappointment. During my mock, I begin with a 675 in the mock 1. I was at a plateau wherein I hit 685 with the next two mocks. Then the fourth mock I went to 735. Then in the fifth mock I came down again to 715, and in the sixth mock I again ended at 695. DI was always very uncertain for me of how it will happen. So that's why I had put in. During my final phase of preparation, like when I booked my exam, DI, I eventually used to hit a time crunch wherein if somehow I ended up spending more than 2.5 minutes in any question, it used to hit me a lot at the end. So my way of starting the exam was DI, quant, and verbal, which is generally a bit different from what people do. People generally prefer to start with quant or verbal, but I prefer to start with DI because I thought that I need a very fresh mind to start with DI, and I felt that my mind would be most working when I'll just start the exam. So I started with DI. I was pacing really well. For the first 10 questions, there was no issues. I ended the first 10 questions within 20 minutes. So I was having good amount of time left with me. MSR also went really well. But this time around, what came to my shock is like when I saw the ESR. So I scored a 82 in verbal, in DI, sorry. So in the ESR, I saw that I made 4 mistakes, correct. So out of the 4 mistakes, one I was very aware of. Wrong with quant because my logics were clear. I did engineering. I just passed out last year, and also my quant scores were good. So I was very confident with quant ki this I'll ace. But in the actual exam, I ended up making 2 mistakes. I don't know how, which never used to happen. And I ended up getting a quant 86, which was like very, very shocking for me when I saw the report just when the exam ends, because I never expected that I'll end up hitting a quant 86, because quant 88 was the minimum I was getting before that. To my bad luck, what happened, Manan, is like I got 4 RCs in the test, which is like normal, people get that. But 2 of my RCs were the long RCs, and topic for both was like the first one, it was around some fish keeping tradition in China, and the other one was the status of poor women prior to civil war in US. So it was like both of these topics were like very intimidating to me, because whatsoever mistakes I made ever were like in these kinds of passages only, because I couldn't connect the dots. I knew that I have to pace myself well. But as soon as the long passage came, my entire calculation went off, because long passage, I knew that I would require 4 minutes easy to at least, if I put in my conscious efforts to understand this, I need at least 4 minutes to connect the dots. After finishing the test, Manan, I just kept numb for like 2-3 minutes. I just removed the headphone which was there, kept it outside, and just was looking at the screen, because I couldn't believe it. There are some kind of shortcomings. That's why I wasn't consistent with my mocks at 700. I knew that. But I thought at least I'll score somewhere around 85, 95, because 95 is also is a very good score. 85, 95 is a good, decently good score, and I am targeting to go to IS. But then when I got a 665, I couldn't understand only how did it go so wrong. So yeah.
One, that if pacing is off and if you made a string of mistakes, it plummets your score. And that's something that, like, irrespective of how well you otherwise would have performed, it definitely would have taken your entire verbal section for a toss, and that would have impacted your score by a greater margin than what it would have impacted had you scattered the mistakes across the paper. I don't think that's a big issue to handle, to be honest, because pacing is something you can get a lot better at once you know that, there are 4 passages. This is the time I take to answer the passages. These are the kinds of passages I tend to take, let's say 7 to 8 minutes maximum on it. So you keep that worst case scenario in your mind, and then you do backwards calculation to know how much time should you be left with for the last 7 to 8 questions. So that's something that has pretty much helped everyone, and whosoever has applied this has been able to manage the verbal section very well. And secondly, I think even the number of mistakes that you're talking about, right? Like, the CR mistakes would never go down if your RC is weak, right? CR, if you're making 2 to 3 mistakes, no matter how much CR you practice, you will never be able to improve on it unless your RC actually becomes strong. And that's what I think should be your prime focus at this point. Longer passages, how do you kind of make sure that you don't get flustered by it? Like, I don't think there's any better resource than LSAT at this point for you to really condition your brain to be able to go through longer passages without really feeling anxious or stressed about how will I manage time. And ideally, you should push yourself beyond what is expected on the exam. If what is expected is around 2 minutes per question or 150 seconds per question, you need to put yourself in a position where you get comfortable answering questions in less than 1.5 minutes per question. You can't just settle for what you're doing on the mocks, because when you're doing the mocks, even in the back of your head that it doesn't mean anything. the stakes are nothing, right? You're just getting a feedback in terms of what you've done, but you wouldn't really be in the same state of mind on the day of the exam, right? On the day of the exam, the stakes are higher, you are more stressed, you are more anxious, you will take longer. So if you're feeling content with the fact that you managed your pacing well on the mocks and you were able to finish the test maybe like a few seconds before time, it will get the problem will become worse on the day of the exam. And that's why like pushing itself a little more than what's expected can actually help you to manage the day of the exam better. So verbal has to be fixed because 7 to 8 mistakes is a lot. And frankly, like even if you're not aiming for an extremely high score because you think you're only applying for ISP, you might get multiple scholarship opportunities. You might end up saving lakhs of rupees. When you know that you have the potential to do well, then don't just settle for something less than that. Because even in recruitments and all, you'll actually have an edge over people who have just been able to meet the above average kind of a threshold as far as ISP is concerned. With the graphs and tables that you talked about and even quant that you talked about, I mean, it seems to me to be a classic case of overconfidence where you did not really do the due diligence, where you wanted to verify your answers before you moved on. And because you had a good track record of solving graphs and tables correctly, you might have become a little negligent there. And that might have cost you those questions. I think it's a classic case of overconfidence. So you just can't take anything for granted. And thirdly, I honestly believe that it's good that you did not score what you were expecting, because then the motivation to take it again would not be there. And you might have settled for like the 675, 685 kind of a score because you know that's enough for ISP. The fact that you scored less than your expectations at least gives you that motivation that I know I haven't got there and I know I can do even better. So why don't I push myself? You might have called it quits right here, where I feel that you actually can do easily a 705 kind of a score. So if you know you can do that, this might actually be a blessing in disguise. So take it in the right spirit. Like we have kind of objectively understood the kinds of things that you've done on the exam, which if you were to remedy will help you to boost your score. You've already worked very well on those MSR questions and all that actually do trip up a lot of people. And those are the ones that are more time consuming to actually master. And I don't think the first mock you should take until you know that you're essentially as good on RC as you are on, let's say, graphs and tables, where you know that you're making like a one-off mistake, and that's ideally happening just because of lapse in concentration, not because of any kind of fundamental misapplication of technique, right? So if that's the stage that you can reach in about 10 days, which I'm fairly confident you can, because I've seen people who were like starting at way lower level than you were starting at this point, and they were able to pace it up to a point where they were getting 95 to 100% accuracy in about 7 to 8 days.